Okay, so then we get to the economy. Now, unfortunately, the economy is always a contentious subject, but in South Africa more so. Now, I do say in South Africa more so because we've been declared junk status, and it's all these things going on about that. But just to tell you that this is a global issue. It's not that it's only us and it only happens to us. There are a lot of developing countries out there. There are a lot of even first world countries. If you look at the Wall Street crash back in the day, I don't know if it was in the 1930s or somewhere there, which was a huge thing. And you have to think about that. Even the Great Depression, the things that happened after war, a lot of soldiers had to go and fight and leave their jobs behind and go and fight for their country. Women stayed behind. They had to take care of the kids, or maybe they also started working. But at the end of it, the economy was really in such a poor state because people had to start rebuilding businesses. They had to start from scratch because everything was almost at a standstill. When the war was raging. So even with the Wall Street crash, with the depression, it just shows you that globally the economy is suffering, all right? And as a problem in South Africa that we have been declared junk status, and with our recession, the problem that I have with that as well is that if you're trying to do business with other countries, now all of a sudden their perceived notion of who and what South Africa is, once again tying that or associating that with your national identity. Who would want to do business with us? Who actually, if I'm now talking about money, right? And you're asking people to invest in your country, who would be willing to invest in your country if you've been declared junk status? Because remember, you invest something to get something back. If you invest without the want or the need or the expectation, that's the right word, of getting anything in return, then it's rather charity or sponsorship or philanthropy. Whereas investment basically suggests, okay, I'm giving you something and I'm expecting something in return. And that is what we call in business ROI, which is return on investment. If I give you money for this, what am I getting back? Right, and who wants to put money into a country if they're not guaranteed that there is a definite outcome? Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm not saying South Africa is a poor country in that sense. There are a lot of businesses that are very lucrative, that are making money, that are changing the way business works, which is fantastic. Invest with them. I'm just saying there is a bigger thing at play. Whereas people are worried about it, because you have to also think, if you now work with another publisher, with a foreign publisher, they don't just look at South Africa and they don't just look at you as a small publishing house in South Africa. They have to also consider the bigger context, which is the same that I'll do. If I want to now go and start a collaboration with Russian publishers, I first have to go and research the country. What is happening there? What are the legal limitations? What are their copyright laws? What is happening in their politics? What in the best environment? What's happening in politics? What's happening in economics? What's happening in their social and technological environment before I even start collaborating or working with that company? So the economy is definitely a global problem, and we are all aware of each other's problems as well. Okay. The next thing we're moving on is to the feminism, gay and lesbian rights, and then environmentalism as well. Now, this has more to do with genres. You'll see in the notes I have a lot more information on that, so that's why these presentations go with the notes, but you have to go and study the notes by yourself and make extra notes and then ask me if you have any questions. But you'll see, and that's also a pity that you couldn't listen to Magdalene Snyman from Pan Macmillan, because she really do talk about a lot of trends that's interesting and current. And because they're also part of a bigger company, Macmillan, they get to hear a lot of other things about trends going on in the world. And she really mentioned last time when she was here for the 3rd years, she mentioned that this has really become a huge trend in publishing, and that is, it's a worldwide trend, but obviously this is going to translate into publishing, because publishing mirrors whatever happens on a social cultural front in the society or with humans at the moment. Okay. So with feminism, there's been a lot of feminist writings. There's been a lot of an upsurge of femininity, or not femininity, of feminism as a movement. Woman power, people claiming back their voices, fighting for their rights as women. Even today, after so many years of struggling and working for it and advocating women's rights, there are still a lot of inequalities, especially in business, with regards to women's rights. And especially if you link this to the Me Too movements, which is more now about sexual harassment, there's also been that issue which really trended, and where people started speaking up about the things that were done to them, and people publishing books about it, people going out on social media, calling people out, which finally gave people a voice. And that's one thing that publishers should and can do, is we give people a voice, right? By publishing these stories, by supporting certain arguments and debates and areas of discussion, we give people a voice. Right, here on the left hand side you can just see just an example of a book, Gay Girl, Good God. And there are so many others out there that really mirrors what is going on in society, and this has become a huge trend in publishing. Right, timing is very important. Are you going to ride that wave and also publish books like that now if you're in a publishing company, or are you going to wait and see whether it's sustainable? Because sometimes there are huge trends, but it's only there for a certain period and then it dies down, and you don't want to be the one when all of this has actually died down or trickled down, or the market has been saturated. Now all of a sudden you publish it. Okay, so you have to think about that. Environmentalism, oh my goodness, especially now with COVID and with everything, people are blaming humans for not taking care of the earth and the world. But there has been a huge outcry. You remember that girl also made the speech, but there is a huge outcry as to what are we doing with our natural resources? Are we taking care of earth? Are we taking care of the world? Or all of these things we were basically bestowed the power to take care of man and animal and land, and do we do it, or do we just not care? So obviously there's been a huge trend over the last couple of years or decade even, where people have really started noticing these things, fighting for recycling, for going green, for really taking care of your daily habits and not harming the environment or earth as it may. All right, and obviously once again this is a theme that has been translated into, well, not translated, transferred, that's the word. It's been transferred onto the publishing scene, in the sense that now all of a sudden we have a lot of books focusing on environmentalism. Like the one on the left hand side is more of a adult type book, the Going Green Handbook, 52 inspired ideas for saving money and the environment. Right, so there are so many of these books, which is great and it's awesome, but once again, publishers need to also distinguish themselves from each other and their competitors by saying why their books are better than the other one. But there are so many of these books. If you just start Googling it, you'll see that there are really a lot of these books, which just shows you there's a big demand for these kinds of books. People are conscious about their actions and the implications or consequences of their actions, and therefore this needs to be published. And then going further a little bit is that they would actually now, this is just one example, but even if you go and do a little search and check out these things, I'm just going to make a note here that I'm going to give you a thing to go check out environmental books. There's a lot of things. I know Pan Macmillan also in her talk, Magdalene, talked about how many of these books they've included in their list. The whole thing about plastic and how kids can actually, from a young age, to educate kids as well, because it's fair enough if the parents know what to do, but start teaching your children new habits and ways of caring for the environment. S is for Save the Planet, a How to Be Green alphabet. There they'll say written by Brad Herzog and illustrated, blah, blah. And, you'll really see this, even if you go into a bookstore, which you cannot do right now, but go online then and just search for green, going green, recycling, upcycling, all these buzzwords. The going green thing is really a big thing, and I think it's a huge trend worldwide.